Okay, well, it's 1 o'clock, so we'll just go ahead and get started. Hope everybody's doing well this afternoon. So for today, I wanted to first check in with you to see if there are particular topics that you'd like to see covered in our remaining webinars. So far, what we had in mind was a webinar on challenge exams and one on 508 compliance. If you could type in the chat box or unmute your mics and chime in, would love to hear any other thoughts you have. And while you're not talking, if we could ask you to mute your mics just to reduce background noise. Any particular topics? And what we also are looking forward to doing is sharing ideas and activities that you all have come up with. Right now we have some beginnings of ideas that are very promising, and we hope in a few weeks to share some of those once they're a little more fleshed out. Oh, okay. And Vivian, you have a question about how materials will be put up on the web. So you've all seen the Enter site. So we planned to use a method similar to what we've used on the Enter site to share all of the materials. And that's one of the reasons we asked everyone to use a template so that there would be some consistency across the different sets of materials so that users visiting the site wouldn't, it would make for a better experience. So I assume most of you have seen, if you have not seen the materials on the Enter site, if you could raise your hand. And the little hand icon is just below the participant pane. Okay. And Scott, something on open source resources that are currently available. Oh, well, Scott, you are in luck. We're actually covering that today. And if we don't cover everything that you're hoping to see, just let us know and we can search further. And Matt, we discussed developing instructor support materials. Matt, can you unmute your mic and say a little bit more about that? Matt, I'm going to unmute you. Oh. Okay, there we go. So, Matt, can you say a little more about instructor support materials?
Hey, Margaret, this is Nathan. It looks like Matt says he does not have a microphone today.
He doesn't have what?
It looks like he doesn't have a microphone
today.
Oh,
I see. Okay.
Margaret, I think he's referring to the faculty development trainings that we're planning on offering.
Are you there, Margaret? Okay, I don't know if anybody else can hear me. This is Nathan. It looks like Margaret might have lost her microphone there. Do you still have your microphone working, Brooke?
Yeah, Matt, I can answer your question. We're currently in the process of organizing some topics that would be useful for both IT faculty teaching health IT content and for health faculty teaching health IT content. So we're finalizing the list of topics, and we'll be sending out a survey to faculty sometime in the beginning of May to kind of ascertain what their previous experiences with health IT, what kind of challenges they anticipate, and what topics they'd be interested in learning more about. So you'll be hearing more from us in May, and then we hope to start launching those early September, I believe. So it might be while they start teaching content, but it'll be an ongoing process for a few months. Does that answer your question? And I'm just going to jump over to Margaret's office to see if she's having any troubles. I'll be back. Okay, hi everyone. So Margaret's computer is completely frozen and she can't access any of the controls or anything. So she's going to have to log off and reboot, and means that we'll be dropping everybody from this webinar. So if you all could just sign in approximately 3 minutes, she should have it rebooted and everything hopefully will be working fine. Is that okay with everyone? Hope to see you guys again. Okay, bye.
You can use them under the Creative Commons license. So I'll start with copyright and go through those next couple categories. And for 4, 5, and 6, I'll go through a few more examples of work you might be considering using, or I'll just cover the concept of fair use at the end to make sure that you understand that if you want to put that to use at all. So on the next slide, you'll see, wait for Margaret to switch the slide. On the next slide, you'll see the copyright law is pretty extensive. This is a page that leads to all the different chapters in the current copyright law. We don't need to know all of this. You're not going to have to read all of this. If you have any questions after this is all said and done, you can always write us for feedback. So just be happy to know you won't have to read any of that. On the next slide, you'll see that I zoomed in on one of the more relevant chapters. It's chapter 3 in the copyright law. Next slide, Margaret. Okay, you'll see that basically everything that's created and protected by copyright law is going to stay protected for 70 years after the death of the creator. It varies a little bit. If it's created as a work for hire for a company, it might be more like 95 years, but either way, it's a lot longer than any of us will be able to wait around for things to get free. So just assume that any work that is created is copyright protected unless the copyright holder has stated otherwise. The next slide here is, these are the icons that correspond with the 6 different Creative Commons licenses. And as I said before, each one has a different agreement so that depending on the license applied to a particular work, you can use it in a different way. The broadest, on the next slide, there's a close-up of the one we're going to use for all the grant materials in this course. It's the CC BY. That is the broadest license. which basically states that anybody can use your work as long as they attribute you as the source of that work. Ideally, we'd be able to find a lot of work like this for our course materials, but if that's not the case, we'll deal with whatever Creative Commons license is applied to the work you find, or if it's copyrighted work, or if it's public domain, which is highly unlikely, we'll deal with that as well. So let's just pause for a second and talk about public domain. Let's look at the next slide, Margaret. So if it's not currently protected by copyright, if it's not protected by copyright but also given a Creative Commons license, which would give you a little more flexibility and freedom, it is potentially in the public domain. But like I said on that prior slide, it usually takes 70 years or longer after the death of the creator before it becomes in the public domain. The public domain is not a place, a physical place. It's just the state of the protections that will hold over the work in question. So if something is in the public domain, it's free to be used by anybody, but I'm guessing most of the materials you'll find, aside from possibly some images that Nicole can point us to later, most of the work you're going to be using will be copyright protected, or if you can find Creative Commons licensed work, that'd be great. But
and Nathan, one exception would be government sites, right?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about government sites in particular a little later. We'll go through a quick few examples of works, and we'll talk about how government is a little bit different. So in this example, this slide here is from healthleadersmedia.com. This is one of the more common types of resources you'll be using probably. It's a publicly accessible work, and if you don't know whether or not it's copyright protected, just assume that it is. In this case, we know that it is. If it was a scrollable web page, you could go down, you'd see the copyright logo, and you would know that it's protected, and you would have to contact the copyright holder at Health Leaders Media to ask permission to copy and reuse this work. Of course, pointing to this work from your curriculum, just simply including a citation and URL is completely fine, as long as that's all you're doing. But if you wanted to actually extract parts of this and use it in your curriculum, you'd have to get permission from the copyright holder. So another example of a type of work you're likely to be using in some of your courses are YouTube videos. Now, the interesting thing about YouTube is that anyone who loads content onto YouTube is agreeing to the terms of service and license agreement that YouTube has put in place. So it's a special kind of a situation. If I'll give you a distinction between a video on YouTube and a video on, let's say, just someone's website that wasn't a YouTube video. If someone was hosting a video on their own private website, it's almost guaranteed to be copyright protected and that you would have to ask for permission to use it. Part of the terms of service for YouTube, though, states that anything that is uploaded to YouTube can be used by any YouTube user as long as they're using it within the limits of the YouTube service. So, for example, one of the more popular ways to share videos on YouTube is to use the YouTube embed feature, where you can copy and paste a little bit of code, paste it into your web page or your WordPress or whatever you're using, and it will share the video, but it's still within the confines of the YouTube service, so it's completely legal. You don't have to get copyright permission from the person who uploaded the video. The only time you have to get involved with the content creator for a YouTube video is if you wanted to download it or get a copy of it and serve your own version of that file from your own website, or if you wanted to edit that video, you would have to get permission from the copyright holder. If you're only sharing the video or pointing to it from your curriculum and your course materials, there's nothing else you have to do. It's simple as pointing to it, just like any other website URL. Okay? The next slide is, I'd say, the trickiest concept to understand is fair use. And with fair use, the law says that there are circumstances when you can quote work or use a small portion of that work, and the circumstances are mostly aligned with commenting or criticism or quick references to another work or education. So, for example, if you were to read a news story online from New York Times, that's a copyrighted story, but if you wanted to blog about it and quote it under the terms of fair use, you could quote a small portion of it to make a point about the article, and that would be fine under the terms of fair use. There's not a strict percentage that you can draw from a work, an original work, before you cross the line and abuse fair use and start to infringe on the copyright holder's work. But as a loose approximation, you can maybe take about 10% of a work, depending. But another way of putting it is that if you take the whole kernel or the key concept of a work created by somebody else and basically reuse it, then you probably infringe their copyright. It's a tricky category, so if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer about specific examples, but hopefully we'll be dealing mostly with just pointing people to websites or PDF files or videos online or freely accessible Creative Commons licensed works, and hopefully the copyrighted work will be less likely used. Margaret can probably say more about that later if you have any questions about it, but this won't be the most important category to understand today.
Actually, thank you, Nathan. I just wanted to make another comment about fair use. Fair use applies to how you use material in the classroom. It does not apply to the material that you're sharing in your dissemination documents. So we cannot copy and paste from copyrighted works and include it in our dissemination documents.
As a clear rule, let's just agree with everything Margaret said, because the way fair use is more or less intended to be used is in a classroom setting where there's a fixed number of students that are part of a course that is led by an instructor, not something that's online accessible to anybody. Then it could be just anybody else is finding work. They're not part of a course. They're not part of a program at a college. So, yeah, like Margaret said, let's just assume that that's not going to be that applicable here in the online environment. So before I go on, we can start with a poll question in a second, but before I go on, let's just ask if there are any questions you have about those different categories. We have copyright protected works. We have works that can be reused under the certain terms of a Creative Commons license. And then we have works in the public domain. Those are the three main categories I wanted to discuss. Any questions about those categories at this point? At the end of this video, or this webinar, by the way, I'll be sending the PowerPoint slides for my portion of this webinar, along with the notes in the PowerPoint file. That will include some links to the copyright.gov site, the Creative Commons site, and other sites that I referenced today. All right, so aside from those three categories, I also mentioned things that are publicly accessible online that you might want to point to with the URL. Any questions about that? Any questions about the terms of service and how you can use something like a YouTube video? Okay. And then any questions about fair use? Okay. So with that aside, let's look at this first example of a work, and let's answer the poll Margaret has put up. What ways can you legally include this content that is in your documents? Select one or more, all that you think apply to this work. How can this work be used in your documents? When you're done, Margaret will show the results, and I'll talk about why some can and cannot be applied here. Okay, in just a moment, the results might show. And while we're waiting, I'll start to talk about the answer choices. So the first choice was, could you freely cut and paste content from this work and use it in your course? The answer is no, you can't, because in this case, we're looking at, it's pretty clear, a hardbound book published by McGraw-Hill, and that's guaranteed to be copyright protected. So nobody answered that, that's correct. The next choice is, could you freely cut and paste content but always include an attribution? It looks like one person thought that was the case. I would say the answer is no again, because this is almost guaranteed to be a copyright protected work. Attribution wouldn't be sufficient. You would actually need permission from the copyright holder. The third choice was to include summaries or paraphrased items with a proper citation. A lot of people said yes. I would agree that's correct in this case. You can paraphrase content as long as you're not copy-pasting someone else's paraphrasing or something like a summary from the beginning of the book itself. That's fine. If you're doing your own paraphrasing, that's fine. Including the proper citation is more of a courtesy. It's not even essential for legal reasons. Fourth would be copy and paste a link to the content. Everybody who answered yes on that was right. You can point to anything you want on the web. There's no reason you can't do that. The fifth choice was include instructions to read copyright content. So you could have your curriculum say, students, regarding this course, you'll need to read this book. That's perfectly fine. And along with activities that you have created that are related. So in this case, you're pointing your students to the copyrighted material, telling them where to find the copyrighted material, bookstore, library, whatever. And you're telling them to use activities you have created for the course. In this case, we're doing just the right thing, so you're all right on that answer as well. So let's take another example. Unless anyone has any questions about any of the feedback I provided on this example, let's go to the next poll and take a look at another case. So if Margaret can put up the next poll, that's no problem. We'll do the same poll, but now it's a different work.
Yep, it just takes a minute to load up the polls.
Okay, after you submit that, we'll talk about it. More seconds. All right. So while we wait for the results to show up, I'll start talking. So this one is, can you freely cut and paste content? We'll see what the results were, but I'll tell you now that the answer is no. This is a copyright protected work. It was created by someone at Microsoft, so Microsoft holds the copyright. Just because it's publicly accessible on the internet, you can tell by the URL, that doesn't mean that you can freely cut and paste. Again, no one selected that, and that's correct. The next choice was to freely cut and paste content, but with attribution. Well, that's actually also incorrect. You can never, without permission, copyright holder has to grant permission to copy, paste, and reuse the works. So if you have any confusion about that, I'm happy to answer questions about it, but without permission, you can't reuse the work. Attribution won't be the same thing as permission, so you can't simply point to the source and attribute the source and point to them as the creator of the work and get yourself off the hook. You'll actually need the permission. The third choice was summary or paraphrase. That's correct. You can. Just like with the book, you can summarize and paraphrase a work found online. Just don't use someone else's summary and copy paste it. Can you copy and paste a link to the content? Looks like most people said yes, and the answer is yes. Of course, you can point to someone else's URL and direct your students to that work. And just
Nathan,
like with the
Nathan,
yes.
This is Margaret, and a question came up. Emily, I think it was at Pierce, about using screenshots. And surprisingly, with a lot of Microsoft products, it was legal to use screenshots for academic purposes. So
that's true, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Oh, no. No, I just meant as a separate thing in case. But no, I'm totally with you. Not legal to copy from their training manual.
Right. So an important distinction would be, let's say you were wanting to reference a slide or a page from this website. Margaret mentioned potentially making a screenshot and using that in your course materials. That's definitely okay, because what you're probably doing is exercising fair use. You're probably pointing to...
Oh, I'm sorry, Nathan. I didn't mean a screenshot of one of these. I meant a screenshot of like a Microsoft Word screen. Sorry, I think I created confusion there. So let's say if you were teaching Microsoft Access, for example, and you wanted to include some screenshots of what the Microsoft Access interface looks like, that is legal.
Yeah, that's fair use. That's fine. I think a distinction could be drawn between trying to reuse something someone else has created or reference it by just showing what it looks like. That's the difference. If you're just showing what Microsoft Access looks like or part of the interface looks like, you're fine. In fair use territory. If you're trying to copy one of the design elements from a software application like Access and use the same graphic, now you've crossed into copyright infringement territory. So you don't want to reuse their work, but if you're referencing it just by identifying it with a picture, that's fine. That's fair use. So I was about to say, answer E is also correct, just like it was in the book. I won't go into that any deeper. It's the same as before. Let's look at another example. Poll number 3. Go ahead and answer that, and we'll wait for the results. Got about 15 seconds or so. Okay. So in this case, we're told a little bit about where this came from. It's an assessment question. You might recognize it from the curricular materials created by the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT. This is different from the 2 prior examples that were assumed to be copyright protected, a book and a website from Microsoft. This, we know, you might not have known when you're answering right now, but I know that this is work shared under a Creative Commons license. The license in this case is a non-commercial share-alike license. Oh, I'm sorry, an attribution non-commercial share-alike license. What that basically boils down to is, to use this, you could literally copy it and paste it into your work. To use this, you would have to attribute the creator. So in this case, you point back to the ONC and say they're the origin of this work that we took and created, or changed, I should say. This is where it came from. You have to use it in a non-commercial context, so you can't create something based on this material that will be used for commerce. You can't charge. And then you have to, if you make your work available that you've taken and based on this prior work, you have to continue with the making it shared under similar terms that the ONC had used when they shared it with you. You have to play it forward, so to speak. You have to keep sharing it under the same kind of terms or even broader. But you can't restrict it to a tighter license that they had originally used. So hopefully that makes sense. So to answer the A, B, C, D, E, we can cut and paste content, but answer 2 is better because it's with attribution. So we'll say that no, you can't do A, but yes, you can do B. So if you were thinking A was okay, just don't forget you also have to include the attribution to the content. 3, yes, we can always summarize work. 4, copy and paste a link. We can always do that. And 5, we can always provide information on how to find the work and then design our own activities. But this wouldn't really make sense in this case because there aren't going to be activities based off of one question. Actually, there might be. I guess I could take that back. We could design something to prepare them for this, but either way, you can mostly do C, D, and E. Those are the easiest ones to go with. Let's look at the next poll.
Nathan,
It'll be number 4 now.
Nathan, you said B, C, D, and E, right?
I should have, yes. B,
okay.
C, D, yes.
Yep, thank you.
And so this is where we get into the publicly funded, public office created realm and how it differs from private company created works. This is the website for HIT.gov, and we know that that's a government agency, so all the content on this site was created to be shared on this website by the government agency. The rules you'd want to bear in mind here, I'll share you this link now. It'll also be on the PowerPoint at the end when I have Margaret or whoever email it out. But if you want to take a look at what might be worth reading when you're thinking about government-created works, take a look at this site here. This is a link that Nicole had shared with us last week. Basically, we know that something created by the government is public domain. It was created by the public office, and it's immediately publicly accessible and can be used by the public however we please. The difference between that and something that's 100% definitely public domain is that some of the parts of the website might not be public domain. So I don't know about this particular website, but let's say we're looking at a website for one of the public agencies, and there's a great photo of something. We want to use that photo. We might assume that that photo is in the public domain. It's on a public website, but that actually might be a licensed photograph. The government agency may have purchased a license to use it, and it doesn't actually apply as far as public domain sharing goes. For the most part, though, when you look at a site like healthit.gov, the text, the content in the text form is public domain. They wrote it. It's there for us to use and reuse as we please. So we can copy it and use it. So we would agree with A. No one answered A, but for a lot of the content on the site, it could be public domain. Most of it is. B, it wouldn't be any different in this case, attribution or not, because if it is public domain, we don't need to attribute it. It's always a nice courtesy. You don't have to if it is in public domain. C would be include summaries. Of course, we can do that. 4, of course, we can do that. And 5, we could always give instructions and then create our own activities. So,
Nathan, I have a question. This is Vivian. I find that choosing A at any time is problematic because it could also lead to a charge of plagiarism. I mean, this is not your own use. You'd be cutting and pasting from somebody else. So doesn't that, no matter whether it's public domain or not, doesn't it lead you to a different problem?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. That is a very different problem. Copyright infringement deals with reusing work for your own needs. Plagiarism would be claiming to have created something that was actually created by someone else. So, like you're saying, copy and pasting without attributing to something, you're liable to run the risk of plagiarism if you don't point out that your work is drawing on someone else's work. It's a gamble you could take, but for us, for all the things we're creating in this grant, we're not going to, you're right, we're just going to basically ignore A. We're going to choose a stronger choice like B, C, D, or E.
Okay, good. That was really, I think, what my question was. Is it better just to ignore A? So thank you.
I'd say that's a good way of putting it. We more or less want to ignore it. It can be done, but for this grant, we're just going to choose to ignore it more or less as a bad choice. Okay, and then the last one will be a YouTube video.
And Nathan, maybe we can just point out that we have about 4 minutes left, and I'd like time for Nicole to share some of her open source resources, so maybe you can just touch on the key points on this one and we'll skip the poll.
Sounds good. Let's just say that for this one, we'll skip A. We'll skip B, because you don't want to use cut and paste the video some weird way, unless you're copying the code that will let you embed. And that's through the YouTube service, so that's fine. But for C, you can always do that. 4, you can always do that. And 5, you can always do that pretty much. So on that note, we'll wrap it up, and I'll pass it over to Nicole so she can talk about how we can access Creative Commons materials.
Okay, so just one, thank you very much for that, Nathan. And so in summary about the YouTube links, you can share links, but you cannot take this description that appears on the page and copy and paste that. Because that does belong to someone else. Okay, Nicole, let me pass the controls to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Nathan, for all of that. That's just a head spinner with so much great information. Great, and I'm going to share my desktop. Can everybody see the Creative Commons website?
We can see it, but not on your desktop.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Share application, there we go. And excellent. Okay, I think we're there now. Let me point out this site. We've talked a lot about the Creative Commons website. Here's the homepage. It's just simply creativecommons.org. And one of the nice things about this website, besides pointing you in the direction of all things related to the CC6 licenses, is that you can also look for licensed content through their website. So basically go to the second tab, License, scroll down to Find Licensed Content, and click on that. And what we're looking at here is a search engine. And I'm going to put in Health IT. And what it will allow me to do is go out to the more common search engines. As you can see, we've got Flickr and Google, Google Web, and I say more common when it relates to helping to identify Creative Commons licensed material. So even though there's so many other browsers, Bing, Yahoo, Mozilla, and everything like that, this CC Commons search engine is going to be limited to these particular search engines because they are most favorable right now for identifying CC-related materials. So, for example, I put in what I'm looking for, Health IT. I select Google Images, and up pops a variety of topics. And just a quick pass through it, you can see that we're looking at a lot of kind of military government type of items, as well as things that are probably not even related at all to Health IT. And you have the ability to even narrow down your search a bit more and look for things a little more specifically. As you can see, there's a drop-down box here, and it allows you to get a little more granular in your search. So I look for things that were labeled for reuse with modification. You could even go a next step, look for commercial reuse with modification, or even not filter by license at all. And as you roll over this, and let me go to this one. I think this one page has got the one that I wanted to use. Oh, things have already changed from yesterday. As you roll over, you start to get an idea where these images are. Flickr, a lot of these are on Flickr. I'm looking for, there's a Creative Commons wiki. Well, let's first check on, sorry folks, let's just go to a Flickr one. And here we've got an image. Let's say we were looking for people that looked official and we wanted to see if we could possibly use this image. You can view the original image. You can also go back here, visit the page that the image is located on. And this is going to tell you a little bit about who took the picture, because Flickr, as you know, is a site where we can share images. And if you scroll down here to license, you'll see some rights reserved. If we click on that, that expands and gives us what the Creative Commons license is here. So it's a CC BY non-commercial use, so that we can use it if we give attribution, but not for commercial purposes. And so let's go back to our main page here and go to one that we know is on the Wikimedia site. I have to say that the Wikimedia site I find is most rewarding when looking for images out on the web that I can use with in the broadest capacity. This site, Wikimedia Commons, is updated almost daily, it seems. A lot of it coming from government sites or things that had been put out into copyright, and copyright has expired, and now they are now into the general domain, in the general public. So let's say for some reason we wanted to use this graphic. You've got a lot of great tools right here on the right-hand side. If you click download, you can see all the sizes available, 32 pixels all the way up to 512 pixels, and that is probably the full resolution size. Plus, you can have you've got your direct link for attribution, and if you want it as an HTML link, you can click that too when you download. Then if we scroll down here, we can get some information about the actual licensing. That this one happens to be the public domain, so yay for us, we can actually go ahead and use this. It also can tell about the file history, where it's actually been used perhaps out on the web. If you would like to see, you know, sometimes there might be a topic, you can cross-reference and hit upon a jackpot here in this area. And see what other items or resources are out there, and how this file was used on other wikis. And as you can see, this file was used a lot. So this is Wikimedia Commons is a great place if you're just wanting to look for generic images. One of the things that I will mention, if you go up here into the search bar and you type in, like, let's say, health IT, and you're looking for, or let me get a little more specific, like electronic health records, and you're looking for perhaps a screenshot of an electronic health record, you might have to play around with the search a little bit till you get something that looks like an image you might want. You just by typing in EHR may not get you that type of image, but playing around with like computer screen EHR or you know, just variants, you can get a little closer to something you might want. So have a little patience too as you start to search out there. Let me go real quick. I know we're creativecommons.org. I'm going to go right back to our site here one more time so everybody can see this. Not only can we search for images like through Flickr and Google Images and Wikimedia Commons, you can also come up with some videos. And on YouTube, it will take you to those videos that are strictly identified under the Creative Commons use, as opposed to going to YouTube General and searching that way. So this is a great place to start to look for images, videos, even audio files. As you can see, we have CC Mixter down here that you have a very broad use license to use. So with that, I just want to pause and see if there are any particular questions about getting started looking for CC approved images. Anybody? Let's see. I will pass this back to Margaret then.
Thank you, Nicole. A lot of rich resources out there.
Yeah, it's a great site. It's my go-to when I want to look for resources and images out there that I can just poach freely. Well, with an asterisk next to it, of course.
And we'll be happy to send this link out in a follow-up email. Anything else anybody would like to comment on or ask a question about? And I'm sorry we're running a little overtime because of that earlier technical glitch. All right, well, thank you all for tuning in once again. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you all. This was a great presentation. Good information.
Great,
Thanks.
thanks. Bye-bye.